You're muted, Jon.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Game Development Livestream. Today's episode is with Jen MacLean, who has been in the game industry for a while in both startups and some of the biggest companies out there. I'll let Jen introduce herself in a moment, but I'm Jon Radoff. I'm the CEO of a company called Beamable. We build game infrastructures. We help you build the online services parts of your games. I'm accompanied here by Oscar, who keeps us on track for all of these. And as usual, Oscar will bring in you to this live stream if you want to join us. There's a reason we do it live, and that is so that you, the community, can be part of these conversations that we host. So definitely post your questions. If you want to be live and you got a camera and a mic, we'll bring you right on. That can happen too. But without further ado, let me introduce Jen. Jen, tell us a little bit about your journey through the game industry so far and what you're doing today.
Well, Jon, first of all, thanks so much, Jon and Oscar. Thanks so much for having me today. I'm super excited to be here. I have been a gamer my entire life. I got an Atari 2600 and it was just all downhill or uphill from there. I got my start in the industry as a playtester. My fencing coach at Hopkins was a game designer at Microprose, and he saw how I would just be glued to my Game Boy playing Tetris on our van trips for fencing competitions. And he said, hey, our playtest department is hiring over the summer. Do you want to come interview? And of course, that was a no-brainer. I ended up working part-time through my last 2 years of college. And when I graduated, they were kind enough to offer me a full-time job. So I set aside my dreams of joining the Foreign Service and decided to go into the games industry. And it has been an amazing adventure.
Great, Jen. What are you doing today? What's the company?
So I left Xbox in September because my team managed the largest third-party partnerships, and I got to see the data from all of the top third-party games on Xbox, and also got to see a lot of the research on Gen Z and Gen Alpha. I was co-leading next-gen content strategy at the time as well. And it became so obvious to me that there is such a gap as players start to transition playtime from Minecraft and Roblox to other entertainment experiences. They would go to games like Fortnite and Valorant, which are great, but you also had a very sizable audience who would leave games and go to social platforms like TikTok and YouTube Shorts because they didn't have something that was collaborative and creative and cooperative. And I just couldn't get this opportunity out of my head. And I knew that if I didn't go after it, I would regret it for the rest of my life. So I reached out to my good friend, Chris Nemkowski. I worked with Nemco way back in the day, shipping Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, Epic Huge Games, and said, hey, I'm thinking about starting a studio. Do you want to talk? And he said, yeah, but I have this idea I'm fixated on, and I don't know if I can let go of it. So we talked, and as it turns out, we were seeing the same things. Chris has an 8-year-old, and every time his 8-year-old gets really excited, he'll go, Dad, smash that like and subscribe button. And you would,
By the way, do that right now.
Right. Smash that like and subscribe button.
Subscribe now. Smash that like.
And Chris had been speaking with Michelle Miller, who's an amazingly gifted systems designer. She got her start as a writer designer on Civ 5, then worked on XCOM, went to Zynga building social systems. Most recently was creative director on an unannounced RPG. And Michelle has a 10-year-old. And her 10-year-old loves watching creator videos from Minecraft, but then feels bad because she just can't replicate what she's seeing. And so the three of us, by looking at our kids, I have an 8-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 20-year-old, kept seeing the same thing. With the data to back it up that I had access to at Microsoft, I thought, you know what, we've got an amazing team. There's this huge opportunity. And I think the world needs this. This sounds cheesy, but when you read The Anxious Generation, when you watch shows like Adolescence on Netflix, this audience, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they feel alienated. They feel like they are one person in a crowd. They crave validation. They crave being seen and feeling like they're important. 69% of this audience have changed social circles to paper. And if you look at Tumblr, half of Tumblr's audience is Gen Z, and they've kind of very much in the background become this nexus for Gen Z. If you read their Tumblr community report, it reiterates that what this audience really wants is a safe space with high quality content and meaningful connections to other people. And I think there are ways for us as an industry to deliver that don't involve killing other people.
So I've got to almost double click back to Tumblr, though. I have to admit, Tumblr is not a URL on the internet I have thought of in probably 10 years or something. So I'm shocked by this. So, by the way, this is an industry audience. So a lot of the folks tuning in work in the game industry. Sounds like you uncovered an interesting community. What's going on with Tumblr? It's alive.
It's alive, right? And
I should know better.
Many because I think people of our age, they're like, oh, you're right. I haven't thought about Tumblr in 10 years. And it's become this quiet destination for Gen Z. And Gen Z, if you talk to anyone in that audience, they hate Facebook. Facebook is where their parents are. Guilty.
Yep.
They
Guilty.
want, yep. They really want an audience where they feel like it's their community. They feel like they're the ones that get to curate what they see. They are kind of rebelling against the AI algorithms. And it's that connection to high quality content that is also super, super important. The Tumblr community report was fascinating. It's available online and you just have to Google it. And I would love people to check it out because I think it really opens up some insights into what this audience wants and needs that we haven't thought enough about as an industry.
What are some? I mean, are there other channels out there that that are flying under the wire that we should be looking at?
It's funny. I think the other ones are pretty obvious. We've all got our eyes on Discord, especially with our social SDK, which I think is super, super exciting. YouTube Shorts, TikTok. Okay, yeah, we've all heard about that. But what has been fascinating for me, we have an intern on our team from the BU Masters in Digital Media program. And she's been amazing because we'll go and say like, hey, for example, as we're getting ready to launch the company, like, where do you get your industry news from? And everybody on the team, the older people are like, oh, GameSpeed or GI.biz or Game Developer. And Liv would say TikTok. I never would have thought about TikTok as a source for news. And it just goes to show how this audience has such different needs and attitudes and how they are really blurring kind of the lines between what we think a good source is or the right destination is, but where they are congregating and where they are really looking for community and content.
Jen, you worked for some of the biggest companies in gaming, period. I mean, Microsoft, Xbox goes without saying, Amazon, certainly super significant, both on the cloud infrastructure side and their own game studio. So, sounds like easy mode compared to a startup. I don't want to minimize the work of working for those companies because they do incredible work, but why switch from that to starting up a company again? And also, what did you learn from those experiences at these really large companies that you feel are helpful to you as a startup? Or do you gain competitive advantage as a startup entrepreneur coming from those kind of companies?
I think you do. And it's not just the information that I had access to. So I did have to smile at the idea of running Microsoft's largest third-party partnerships is easy mode. I'm not sure I would agree with that, but for me,
easy for me to say sitting here from another startup. Sure.
The thing about a startup is there's no comparison to the highs and lows. The highs are higher, the lows are lower because it's personal. Because it is you and it's your team. And it's something that you have risked a lot on. Time that you will never get back, money, energy, credibility, connections. But the velocity you can generate with the right people on your startup is intoxicating. We had our lead engineer start January 27th. We had a playable hands-on demo of our exploration prototype at GDC. Doing that in 6 weeks with a team of 6, you couldn't do it at a larger company. You just couldn't, because you'd have to have too many meetings with too many stakeholders, and you'd be spending half your time meeting. We have a 15-minute stand-up, and then we play the build, and everything else is creating. And that is exhilarating. The other thing, too, is that I think when I saw this opportunity, I thought, you know what, to try and do it in the context of a larger company means you're going to have to convince so many other people that there is this opportunity, and you're going to have to make compromises, and you're going to have to make trade-offs, because the people running the largest publishers, the largest platforms, have their own priorities, and that's fine. They should, but that doesn't necessarily lend itself to innovation. And as we think, for example, about working with a publisher, I'm excited to work with the right publisher, because there are so many tasks that, to me, aren't meaningfully differentiating to a player, but they have to be done, and they should be done well. I don't want to invest my team's time in becoming an expert at localization or QA. Those are kind of table stakes tasks. I want to invest in clearly differentiating features, functionality, approaches. But when you think about a larger company, really trying to push that differentiation can be really, really hard, because at the end of the day, if you work for a large public company, they are thinking, I'm on the hook to double my business in every 5 years. Is this bet going to be the one that pays off, or should I just do another sequel for this title? And I think those barriers have really stymied the largest companies in the industry. And for me, the decision to try and go startup was really made easy by the idea that we can innovate, we can do it fast, we can adapt our community early, we can get the game into the hands of players very early, in a way that a team at a larger publisher or platform would probably have a lot of trouble doing. So, Jon, you had asked what I learned at Amazon and Microsoft, and they are two such different cultures. They're both very singular. And I think if you could combine them somehow, you'd have the best company in the world. But there's also a lot that's conflicting. Amazon is really a culture driven by the Amazon leadership principles. And if you ever loop for a job at Amazon, your recruiter will tell you, you will be asked behavioral interview questions that align to these leadership principles. So you need to know them and live them. The ones that have always stuck with me: customer obsession, first and foremost, learn and be curious, bias for action, frugality. These are all things that, as a seasoned startup CEO, I bet you live those as well. And I think with Amazon, they really focus on what they call 2 pizza sized teams, right? The idea that you are working in a small team where 2 pizzas can feed everyone on the team at lunch. And I think that focus on smaller teams, on being customer obsessed, on being curious, on biasing for action is incredibly valuable. And those things very much came with me, both to Microsoft, then especially to DragonStacks. What I loved about Microsoft is they took a very different approach to people management, where Amazon was focused on hire and develop the best. As a leader at Microsoft, you're expected to model coach and care. And if you look at Amazon's leadership principles, you will not see the word care. And for me, I believe that you can't really develop the best talent if you don't care about them as people. And if you don't model the right behavior, if you don't coach them and have the difficult conversations. The other thing that Microsoft did that was really interesting, and in many ways a direct contrast to Amazon, is you are assessed on 3 things for your performance at Microsoft. You are assessed on the results that you deliver, how you leverage the work of others, and how you contribute to the work of others. So from my perspective, again, as a startup, if you try and have a siloed startup, first of all, in a team of 6, that does not work. but also you end up creating so many more problems than you should have. And so that idea that we are all responsible together for our collective success, that part of being great at what you do as a startup is leveraging the work of others and also contributing to the work of your teammate. Like that was core to the culture that we set up here at Dragon Snacks. We wrote a values and principles document. And a lot of it is like, look, you are on the hook for making sure everyone is successful, not just you.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to talk a little bit more about Dragon Snacks. I know you don't want to talk too much about the game right now. And I do want to return and double down on some of those learning experiences you were just referring to. But I'd love you to comment a little bit beyond the audience that you're going after. So you're going after the Gen Z audience. You've identified a few ways that they're different, particularly the media and the places that they are. I have a couple of 13-year-olds, actually. They're actually quite different in the places that they go online. They both play games, but my son is like Minecraft, Roblox, doesn't really play a lot of what I'd consider to be like AAA games. He does play Elden Ring, but not a lot beyond that. And he's on Discord continuously. My daughter, not on Discord. She plays The Sims. She plays cozy games, like very different. Like she plays Stardew Valley a lot. Like, so very different games. Not a lot of multiplayer games, actually. She seems to like want to take gaming time and be by herself. So I don't know. They are admittedly about the youngest cohort of Gen Z, but very, very different in terms of how they engage. And that makes me also think Gen Z also can't be simply put into a box and like, here's Gen Z, here's how we go after them. Like there's like any generation, there's a lot of nuance there and differentiations. While you're thinking about what you might be able to tell us about Dragon Snacks, I just also want to remind our audience, because we've got 255 people as we speak here who've tuned in to watch this. Probably bigger than most GDC talks, actually. So here you are in the audience with a leader in video gaming, Jen, who's got a startup, who worked at Amazon, who worked at Microsoft.
A luminary.
Yep. So listen, like use this opportunity to be part of the conversation and ask a question. We don't have the go up to the mic at the end of the talk like at GDC. It literally happens during the course of the conversation. So do post your questions. And if you want to join live and on camera, Oscar will set you up. Just say that you want to do that. Send them a DM on any of the platforms. We're on YouTube, Twitch, LinkedIn, Facebook, X. So we're all over the place.
Friendster.
Right. Jen. That's a good one. Jen, so what can you tell us more about Dragon Snacks? Like what are you going to build that's going to appeal to this audience you're going after?
Yeah, Jon, and I love your example of how different your kids are. I see the same thing with mine. My 8-year-old is kind of an omnivore player. He'll play anything. I've been playing Blueprints recently, like many of the audience, I'm sure. And my 8-year-old loves sitting next to me and talking about what draft strategy we should use and why we should do this room against that room. He also loves Roblox. He loves Minecraft. He loves Stardew Valley. He loves Power Wash Simulator. For him, games are really about connecting with people, right? Like he wants to use games as a way to connect with his sisters, with his parents, with his friends. My 12-year-old plays mostly Roblox, and she does it with her phone propped up next to her, and she's FaceTiming or Discording or WhatsApping because she wants a more intimate and safer connection with her friends than she can get in the noise of a large Roblox game. My 20-year-old, and this is what really fascinates me, she has made a character in pretty much every major RPG of the last 10 years. And she will go super, super deep on the character creator and then maybe play 5 minutes of the game. And that's it. And it mystifies me, and I kind of feel like a sucker because I bought her Veilguard in the hope that she would actually do more than create a character. She played for 5 minutes, but love the character creator. Huge shout out to the Veilguard team because that character creator is amazing. And it's funny because the only game that the only RPG she's played more than 5 minutes of is Mass Effect 2, which she's gone through and completed 3 or 4 different times. But all the other RPGs, it's all about the character creator. And this is very much backed up about the research on personalization for Gen Z, how much they really want a deeply personalized experience. On the other hand, my 20-year-old is easily the family champion on Valorant and Fortnite. She is super competitive. She's very, very good. And it really shows to me that you can't kind of pigeonhole somebody by any of the standard demographics. It gets back to research that people play games for different emotional needs. And it's why you can talk to the same gamer and they'll say, oh, I play the first person shooter with my buddies from college on a Friday night with a beer. And then I'll play, Clash of Clans or Candy Crush on my mobile phone when I have a few minutes to kill while I'm waiting in line. And then I might play The Sims because I really love kind of how I grow and progress the family. I had the chance to work with EA way back in 2011, 2012 to publish a game. And they shared with us this research they did where they went into people's homes and said, like, tell us about your games. And people would pull out their games and they do the same things like, oh, I play Just Dance when we've had friends over and we've all been drinking and it's hilarious. And people play different games at different times because they want different emotional engagement. So for us, when we think about what we're building at Dragon Snacks, we have 3 player personas that we use. And this is something that Nemco really learned and refined at Scopely working on Monopoly Go, where he was VP and GM of the studio that shipped Monopoly Go. So we think about creators. These are people who love making great things and sharing them. Sharing them is absolutely an important part of that validation. And you see it in statistics like 57% of Gen Z wanting to be influencers. This audience craves sharing and being validated and getting those likes and subscribes. We have the Explorer, and this is your more traditional RPG player, min-maxing their class specialties, completing every quest, very much a completionist, getting all of the resources. And then we have the Storyteller. And this is the person who really engages in the fandom. They will have long conversations about what NPC is the best to date and why. They will help write your wiki on fandom. Like I can see you laughing, John. I bet you have had some of those conversations with your kids or heard their arguments. And so for us, it's really thinking about those 3 personas and what their emotional needs are and making sure that we're crafting a game that meets them. And so our development philosophy is that every milestone has a player-facing goal. You can play it at the end of the milestone. And we're working up to vertical slice where our goal is to test it against those 3 personas and get our vertical slice in the hands of players to really go deep on, are we meeting their emotional needs? Are we creating something that engages a storyteller and a creator and an explorer? And really testing our hypotheses, because I think as an industry, we don't test our hypotheses enough.
Let's talk about that for a little bit then. How do you actually test some of the assumptions that go into a game? I'll share my own anecdote with that first, which is when I was building a Star Trek game. Star Trek is a really challenging IP. It's not just it's not Star Wars. Star Wars, I actually think it's pretty straightforward what you have to do to succeed at Star Wars. You have to have people fighting each other with lightsabers and or starships. And if you can do one or both of those great, then you have a really successful game on your hand. Star Trek's harder because while it does have like fighting aspects to it, it's not really the dominant theme. So you have to tap into storytelling and all these ideas that Gene Roddenberry had about it. So we ended up basically building 4 different games, and the first 4 actually just weren't going to be good enough. We built like a card game, a RPG game, and it just wasn't clicking. And the 5th one worked really well. So we had to really not get overly married to the earliest ideas, because if we had just gone like full development on the first one, I don't think we would have been successful at any real scale. And in fact, when we were even developing the game that we were pretty passionate about, we went to Penny Arcade Expo, had thousands of people play it in our booth. And then we shipped a different version of the build the second day of Penny Arcade, and we actually looked at the data comparison of how deep into the tutorial people got. So I just want to throw that back to you after that anecdote. Like, how do you think about testing the assumptions in your game? How do you craft like a new player experience to try to capture the attention of the player in those first valuable seconds and minutes that they're engaging?
And I think first-time user experiences are even more important and impactful now with how the industry is changing than they've ever been before. I love, Jon, your approach to getting the game in front of people and doing A/B testing and challenging your assumptions. I don't think there's any substitution for that. And one of the things that we were really clear on at GDC as we met with potential publishers is it is non-negotiable for us to get a version of the game in front of community very early and very often. And if that's not how you think about marketing and launching games, okay, great, but then that we're just not going to be right for each other. Because we think you have to do that kind of testing with data so you make data-informed decisions. Because at the end of the day, we're not our audience, right? And our audience will hopefully be large and diverse, and you'll have people who will only want to create things, and you'll have people who only want to date different NPCs, and that's fine, but we need to make sure that we are satisfying all of their needs. We also partner with a company called Guild, GYLD, and they have a really fascinating AI platform that they use to test a game design document against, the Steam data set, essentially. And we very, very early on got their feedback on what we saw as our core features and functionality, just to, again, quantitatively as much as possible, verify that our assumptions, things like multiplayer are absolutely key, were true. And the combination of being able to use AI to drive those insights, but also getting real player data, I think that's critical to success in the industry today.
I feel like one of the hardest things to do with a new gaming startup is curating that initial community of players who accurately reflects the target market that you're going after, and there's enough of them that they can give you credible feedback that you can use for the game. Now, for me, this is an aspect that was easier for Star Trek because finding Star Trek fans was not super hard. Like CBS literally had a mailing list of like millions of people who were Star Trek fans, and we could just blast them and be like, "Hey, you want to try an alpha game in Star Trek?" The answer is like yes from a lot of people right away. Or you go to the convention, the Star Trek convention, there's like thousands of people there that pay a lot of money actually to be at this convention, and we can just find them. How do you do that with a brand new game in a really noisy industry where there were 19,000 games launched on Steam last year, and I don't know how many hundreds of thousands on mobile? Like, it's really hard to break through. How do you get the attention of an audience like Gen Z, where I think they're also like their attention is very divided across a lot of things, right?
Yeah, for sure. And for us, micro influencers are a really important part of that strategy. And I want to highlight micro influencers because the reality is that if we worked with some of the largest influencers in the world who are known for playing first-person shooters to talk about a cooperative, private server 16-person multiplayer game, it would feel like a huge mismatch. And I think this audience is particularly adept at picking up on bullshit. They know when they're being sold to, they know when they're being manipulated. And it's really important for us to develop those authentic partnerships so that I would, in a way where if a micro influencer talks about like, hey, I'm working with this team and they've got this special beta that only my viewers get an invite to, it kind of becomes a status thing. By reassuring the community, we will listen, that they are not one of a million people clamoring that we want to involve them. I think that's also really, really important for this audience. And really being very clear and authentic in our voice. So again, if we were to partner with a very large streamer who doesn't love this type of game, who doesn't love something that's cooperative and collaborative, like that feels so inauthentic. And it goes against our values. It goes against our principles. And it's something that I think ends up alienating a community. But then when you work with the right micro influencer, it's like you have your advocate, you have your marketer. And then with a multiplayer game particularly, those early players also become your evangelists. And that's why I get super excited about things like game subscription services as a way to launch new games. I saw a note on Atomfall, a story on Atomfall earlier today, and I was thrilled to see their success because I think in a lot of ways they can be textbook, same with Palworld, on how you launch a game as an indie studio in 2025, 26, 27, leveraging the power of gaming subscription services to remove a barrier to play.
I want to go back to a much earlier comment you made. You were talking about role of publishers and how they can help, and you mentioned like localization is not something that you want to do at the studio level, or you don't want to build expertise around it. I have a general thesis on game development at the studio, which at any studio, which I sense maybe we're kindred spirits on actually, which is you really have to be hyper disciplined about where you focus your time, because every startup in general, but game studios in particular, have to be super cautious about their runway, how much capital they're burning through. And it's so easy to get distracted in game development, building a lot of things that are actually not the things that the player is going to buy you for. Like they need you to be in French if they speak French, but they're not buying you because you made a French language version, right? So what else is there like that? Like, I guess it's a buy versus build, and obviously also Beamable. Like we exist to help people not build all the online game infrastructure, which ends up costing the average developer like $20 million if they actually scale out a big game. Thoughts on that, Jen?
We feel really strongly that if you can buy a solution that gets you 80% of what you think you need, buy the solution, test, validate, iterate. Because often you'll find that 80% is either close to 99% or close to 20%. And when you get that information quickly, wow, that speed has so much value, because you're right about watching runway and burn, but also time. Like time's the one resource we can never get more of. And so if I can know very, very quickly if we are on the right path in terms of a solution, whether it's the 20% or the 95%, that has enormous value. The other thing that we really believe strongly in is focusing your time and attention on the things that players care about. Players only care about technology and that it empowers a great entertainment experience. Your player should never know your back-end situation. If they do, something has probably gone very, very wrong. And no disrespect to Beamable or any of the other great back-end companies out there, but it's one of those things where you only really notice it if it breaks, because you expect it to work all the time. It's like a utility. And so for us, thinking about—
We say the same thing to people. Yeah, we say the same thing to people. Like your player really literally just doesn't care. They only care if it's broken, which unfortunately it will be if you try to take
extra 100 milliseconds
on your own and get a lot of scale. Yeah, and 100 milliseconds could have your conversion rate on a purchase. Like things like that are super, super important, and people don't realize how critical these are. So it just kind of has to work like magic, and when it does, then it's invisible and the player doesn't care. But sorry to jump in there, but yeah.
No, I think you're exactly right. And like trying to build your own back-end solution or trying to build your own engine, I don't understand it. I know that there are situations where people feel really strongly that they get benefits out of doing it. That's not the way that we operate at Dragon Snacks, because for us, we would much rather be spending that time and attention and energy on something that we think meaningfully differentiates our entertainment experience. Maybe it's art, maybe it's more character design, maybe it's doing something really interesting with 2D and 3D in terms of 2D environments and 3D characters. That creates visual differentiation. That's really cool. That's something your player cares about. They're not going to care about what cloud you're running on. They should never know.
Well, I will tell you why sometimes people do build these things themselves. And it isn't just the level of customization that you were referring to, where they get less than the 80% they thought they needed. We addressed the whole extensibility customization aspect by just making it open and platform where people could add to it. It's not like, PlayFab, for example, of one of our earlier competitors, where it's an API and everything is sort of behind the scenes, and what you see is what you get. We built extensibility, but it turned out that extensibility and customization isn't the thing that worries most game studios. It's what happens when the platform goes away.
Mhm.
So GameSparks, for example, I don't remember if you were at Amazon at the time GameSparks was taken away, but like that affected a lot of games to suddenly lose access to a platform. So what a lot of studios worry about, particularly with a central dependency like a back end, is that goes away, or the business model changes, or the price goes up by 10x.
Mhm.
Maybe that puts me out of business all of a sudden. So it does somewhat lead to this mentality of, well, if I build it myself, at least I don't have to worry about that anymore. I don't think they fully appreciate all the time, like all the new risks that they took on. We ultimately had to realize that to compete in a really big way, we had to open source the technology so that they knew that they could just use it, even if something were to happen to us. But even beyond that, creating an open network where anybody can provide network capacity. It wasn't just an Amazon product or just a Microsoft product like PlayFab. Like, it would be available on all these different service providers. So that's how we started thinking about it. But so centralized risk is one. Like beyond back end, where else though do you see, Jen, areas where game developers are maybe misapplying their resources and building things? I guess we've got two so far: localization and back end. We
QA
don't build
for
a
me.
3D engine anymore.
Right. And I say this with love as someone who started their career as a playtester. Like, QA has so much opportunity for disruption. Between automated testing and being able to outsource QA compatibility, those are things where, as a smaller indie studio, to play on one of the comments in the chat, like, trying to do that ourselves would also be plain insanity, because the reality is that we would never be able to equal the results that a dedicated QA vendor can do. We couldn't.
Yeah.
And that's time and energy and money that we don't spend differentiating our entertainment experience. Accessibility, I think there have been amazing strides in accessibility, but I don't want us to become experts on them, because if we're experts on accessibility, that's time, again, that we're not spending really honing our game experience. And so I would much rather contract with someone who is an expert on accessibility. And I think really kind of thematically, what you're hearing, Jon, is my biggest learning as a startup CEO is that if you try to be expert on everything, you will fail. So you have to make a very conscious decision on what you want to double down on in terms of your expertise, your time investment, your resource investment, your team's expertise and time investment and resource investment. And we do that very deliberately, because we understand that at the end of the day, especially with a small team and especially in the funding environment we're in right now, if you try to do everything, if you try to be everything to every player, if you try to build everything you might possibly need, you're setting yourself up for failure.
So, Jen, I'm glad you mentioned the funding environment, because in the resume of what it takes, I think, to be a successful startup CEO or a game studio startup right now, you better have a lot of expertise around getting money, I think. So, like, getting money is really hard right now. It has been for the last year. Every day there's a startup that has asked me for, like, who would look at this for a pitch, and I'm like, I'll tell you who, but it's really hard. And here's what the bar looks like. It's challenging. I'll save my comments on that for a moment. I'd just love to hear your firsthand experience at that. Like, and this, again, this is an industry audience that this is for. So deliver like real information that people need to hear. Like, if they're trying to raise money, that might help them get to that point. And what's the
I
sober
feel,
reality of this?
I mean, I feel like I've learned so much about this in the last 6 months, and I came into it with a pretty good track record of raising money. I raised over 100 million across my career, done deals worth billions of dollars, and I came into it with a really good Rolodex as well. And I think for me, kind of reflecting back, first of all, I started talking to people way too early, which is kind of natural because you're excited and you want to get money in to start hiring people and building things. But really, the pitch that we have now is so different from the pitch that we started on. And I wish we had kind of done a little bit more of that behind closed doors, frankly. We also have been very deliberate in always asking ourselves, like, where are we seeing success? Where are we not? And so for a lot of the people that we're speaking with, they love the team. They love the velocity. They want to see more game. Okay, great. So how do we show them on an ongoing basis like that we are doubling down on our strengths and that we are delivering more games? Here's another thing that I would have thought I was being an annoying pest. Every 4 to 6 weeks, I send out an update to our current investors, but also potential investors. And when I talk with someone in a pitch meeting, even if it's a no, I'll ask, look, we send out regular updates. Can I add you to that mailing list? And by being able to show that consistent track record of velocity, of delivery, it sets you up for success in your future conversations so well. And again, this is sort of, first time founder, took me a little bit to realize that, but it moves from being a one conversation to relationship to an ongoing dialogue. And it gives people a chance to engage again and again and again, and a chance for you to craft your own story beyond just these very specific distinct moments in time to no, this is an ongoing story and an ongoing tale and an ongoing really focus on how we're not only telling you what we're doing, but we're actually doing it so you can trust us, and how we're learning along the way, because I think that's really important. And especially in very, very early days, the people matter a lot. Trust matters a lot. I think so many investors have been burned by big names on resumes and really having founders who didn't maybe fully understand that delivering a game with a team of 15 is very different than delivering a game with a team of 150. And so for us, a lot of what we are also really leaning into is preemptively addressing some of those concerns. When you have one co-founder who is most recently at Scopely and another at Microsoft, yeah, that's good. But one of the big pieces of feedback you'll get is, how do we know you can effectively deliver in a small team? And so by having that regular touch point with, hey, here's exactly how we're effectively delivering in a small team, we're really setting up that longer term relationship, that longer term investment. And so I think for me, if I could go back to, 6 months ago, Jen, I would be like, look, you have to think of this as a long-term play and a long-term investment in a relationship. You have to really know what you're pitching. And the first thing you think you're pitching is probably not what you're going to end up pitching. And you also have to really understand what hole you are filling in your potential target's portfolio as well. We heard from one investor like, hey, we really love this, but we just invested in a very similar team with a very similar idea. Stuff like that happens, and it's not a reflection on us or on the investor. Sometimes you just get unlucky. And especially now when you have VCs who are talking to maybe 10 or 15 companies a week and making 1 or 2 investments a year, you have to go into it being prepared to be unlucky. Prepare to be lucky, but also be prepared to be unlucky. And sometimes that's just the breaks.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, it is partly a numbers game. I can't even tell you how many funds I talked to until Bitcraft stepped up and led our Series A, and it was a very challenging environment for most of last year to get any money at all. So, and it really just came down to finding not just the right fund, but the right person at that fund who got the vision and had kind of been trying to find the thing that we were and hadn't found the right team yet. So that was kind of us at that point, but that's the advice, I think, to founders generally, which is don't get discouraged by a lot of no's. You're going to hear a lot of no's. In fact, venture capital, like they only invest in 1% or less of the deals that they've even inspected. So of course you're going to get a no most of the time. There's a couple of other things that I extract from your comment, though. One is just this idea that investors right now in this environment are looking for evidence, not just narratives.
Mm-hmm.
Like when everybody's getting money and the dollars are flowing, great narratives can win a lot of deals, and people get money on PowerPoint decks that you scratch your head and you wonder how the heck that happened. That's a function of like environments where funds have a lot of money, like they did a few years ago before they lost a lot of that money on a lot of those same deals. But so they're looking for evidence, and you're pointing to a kind of evidence which is show your actual ability to execute, not just your background, because most teams have shipped something, but right now, are you shipping? Like, what does that development velocity look like? What does the build of the game look like right now? And then does that build look like it's gone somewhere the next time you follow up with that investor? So an evidence-based approach to here's what we're going to do in this company. In fact, we're already doing it. Like the train is leaving the station. You can get on it or not, but we're going with or without you is sort of something that I find useful. The other, I think, thing, it wasn't exactly explicit in what you were describing, but in my own experience, the worst time to approach most investors is right at that moment where you suddenly need a whole bunch of money to keep executing. You need to be building those relationships with the general partners at funds, with the people who make decisions at publishers. Like that should be at least 6 months, if not much more than that, in advance, where the initial conversations don't even need to be, hey, I'm pitching a deal right now. It can be, I'm building this company. Here's the audience I'm excited about. Game, we're going to figure that out soon, but I don't know exactly yet, but it's going to be for this audience. That's exciting. Like in your case, Gen Z, and I'll probably be raising money in 6 or 12 months. Not sure yet if I'll even need money. Like you can be a little bit coy with these people, but build that relationship so that then as you go back, they see, again, evidence initially in your thought process, how you're thinking about the business and how it continues to evolve. I think most good investors are really curious, like what you've learned along the way, how some of your assumptions are changing. And then once you are building things, to actually show them, here's the build week after week, and it's updating, is incredibly powerful. And frankly, investors don't see that much. Right? Like everybody's out there with their pitch deck, but nothing's changing week after week or month after month. They're just hoping to get the money so that they can build the idea. And I know that's really hard to say too, and a lot of people don't want to hear that because they're like, well, how do I do that? Look, startups aren't for everybody is kind of the answer. And you have to figure out how. Sometimes it's with some capital that you can scrape together from wherever, and you show that early momentum. What are your thoughts on like the relationship building aspect and all of that, Jen?
Jon, I couldn't agree more with what you said. And maybe this would probably be a terrible panel because we're agreeing with each other so much. But I respect your journey as a serial entrepreneur and a serial startup CEO. Right? And I think you have probably learned some lessons the hard way. And part of my feeling as a first-time founder is, as much as I can learn from the pain of other people, I want to do that because this is hard. What we do is hard. Making games is hard. Making games as a startup founder is harder. So if there's any way that I can shortcut that pain and suffering, great. I want to do that. I want to do it for my team. I want to do it for my players. I think your point on showing what you've learned is also incredibly, incredibly important because I remember talking to someone who was absolutely convinced, another founder, that he knew everything he needed to know and he was right. And he was not going to tolerate any, like, have you thought about this or have you thought about that? And from my perspective, as somebody who, might make occasional angel investments, that is not a founder I want to back. because I can guarantee he is wrong about something. I can guarantee I'm wrong about something. It gets back to learn and be curious as a leadership principle, right? Like, help me understand what I'm wrong about so I can do better, so I can build a better company, so I can build a better product, so I can build a better team, so I can deliver a better ROI to my investors. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't have a point of view. I think you should, but you should always look for ongoing information that supports that point of view, but maybe more importantly, that contradicts it. Because when you start to say, okay, what was I wrong about? Then you get better. And Jon, I think your story about the 5th version of a Star Trek game is what really clicked, and kind of how you got there shows that in practice, right? Like, you were not going into the first game saying, this is the game. You iterated, you validated, you tested. And I think that mentality is so, so, so important. When you do that in the context of a relationship, when you can go back to a potential investor and say, this was our starting thesis. This is how we tested it. This is how we refined it. This is how we tested it again. Here's the continuing pattern of metrics and what we've learned. Like, that to me is an exciting team to invest in, because they are continuing to get better. And that's what you have to do to succeed today.
I think you were channeling Warren Buffett a moment ago, where he said it's good to learn from your own mistakes. It's better to learn from other people's mistakes. Although it's interesting in the game industry, because you often have to make a lot of new mistakes to learn anything about a game, because everything is always new, unless you're just sort of putting out the next version of a franchise that's long established for the most part. I think the game industry is also a place to learn humility, which you're kind of touching on. Like, if you haven't failed in the game industry, by the way, you probably just haven't been in the game industry long enough, because like the best people in this industry have shipped games that fell short of commercial expectations. And there's so much survivorship bias too. Like, there's game studios will ship one game and it works, and a second game and it works, and then everyone thinks they're geniuses. This happened to me, by the way. Like, Game of Thrones, we shipped it. It did pretty well. Star Trek, we shipped it. I did twice the numbers that I told my investors we would do, and they're like, okay, wow, he was really sandbagging that one. I was just lucky is what happened. Like, I underestimated just how big the Star Trek market was. And we built a good game that could tap into it, but mostly just didn't really appreciate market size. And then we built a third game, and it was my favorite game, but it was the worst performing game. And people were like, oh, maybe Jon doesn't know as much as he thought after all. But then they gave me another chance with Beamable. So it all worked out. But game industry is a tough market. You're going to make mistakes. So I think the worst thing you could do is tell people that you know everything.
Yeah. It's why with our values and principles talk, this was really the first output that we did together as founders for Dragon Snacks. And we did it with the understanding that the what we're building is going to change. It is absolutely going to change. And you can look at like the iteration of our design docs or of our pitch docs, and there are significant changes, even just in 6 months. The how and the why, those should be more fixed. The why should probably be the most fixed. The how, absolutely learn, iterate. But with the how, also things like cross-discipline teams are a superpower. Like, that's something we aren't going to change. Validate. Get a playable build as fast as you can. Play it every day. Get it in front of your players. Those are things that aren't going to change. And so for us, really being super clear and very transparent with anyone we talk to about either joining the studio or partnering with us, like, this is the stuff we will flex on. This is the stuff that we won't, is really important.
Jen, we're getting towards kind of the top of the hour, so I want you to think about maybe some of your closing comments to everyone. I will say also, hey, audience, we've got 1,000 people here, so someone asked some more questions. We got some great ones earlier, but I always want to remind everyone that we're a live show so that you can ask questions along the way. We're having a lot of really awesome guests on this recently, and I just want to also give a plug for some of the stuff that's upcoming. So tomorrow we've got a couple of people from Aether, which is building a whole decentralized network, but for GPUs, just like Beamable is building a network for game servers, they're doing it for GPUs for doing things like pixel streaming and AI inference. Super interesting on the decentralized tech standpoint. Next week, we've got Bilawal Sidhu, really awesome creative tech guy on the AI stream. He's an epic TikTok creator, but more recently doing amazing work with AI to create creative videos and art and all kinds of things like that. On Wednesday, we've got Paul Bettner on. So he's known for Age of Empires, and he did Words with Friends. So like two completely different genres that he was successful in. Now he's doing a Web3 game called Wildcard Alliance. So like awesome lineup of guests. I'm really, really gratified that both people want to watch this stuff and tune in and hear about, you know, what's happening in the real trenches of the game industry, but also just that people want to hang out with me like Jen here and take your valuable time, because you've got a startup to run. Like you've got a lot of really important things to take an hour out of your day to do this. I'm really grateful. Jen, what do you want to let people know about what you're working on, what they should know as game developers, and also how can they learn more about what you're doing? Is there a way that they can learn more?
There is. So you can go to dragonsnacksgames.com. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can see more about the team, more about what we're building. You can also shoot me a note, jen.mclean@dragonsnacksgames.com as well. You know, for me, I think I approach this journey and the opportunity to create with gratitude. I recognize that I am standing on the shoulders of a lot of people before me, people like you, Jon, who have given me great advice, and that this is something where success is not a zero-sum game. So if we are able to demonstrate that there is this opportunity for creative, collaborative, multiplayer games for Gen Z, I hope that spawns a huge amount of new content, because I think this audience needs it, because I want my kids to be spending time in games making something instead of on TikTok comparing their lives to peers who are not actually their peers, who are trained influencers with big budgets that they will never have. I want people to really lean into the idea that we play together because we live together, we succeed together, we love together. And those for me are by far the most important goals and the most important takeaways and the things that I am most grateful for. I also think approaching a startup CEO role with gratitude is really important, because there are going to be days when it sucks. And, you know, kind of going into it with the goal of, yeah, okay, today was hard. For whatever reason, today was hard. But you know what? I'm going to be better tomorrow. And I'm going to learn, and I'm going to share my learnings, and I'm going to not only lift other people up, but I'm going to approach this with gratitude that I got this opportunity. Because the reality is that there are a lot of people who won't ever have this opportunity, who might have great ideas, who might have so much passion, but don't have the privilege of stepping away from a company like Microsoft to go after this idea. And so more than anything, I'm grateful for that as well.
Great wisdom there, Jen. I want to thank you for being on the program here. And I want to thank everybody who also spent the last hour with us listening to this and participating. Your time is super valuable too. We would love you to jump in and be our next guest if you're in the industry. We would love you to participate online and just join in the conversation. This has been a real delight, Jen. Until next time, you're welcome back anytime, by the way. Thank you so much for being here and talking about your journey.
Thanks so much for having me, Jon, Oscar. This was an amazing experience, and I'm so grateful to be here.
Thank you, Jon.
Thank you, Jen.
Take care.